Good evening. So sorry for the slight delay, but we are ready to go for going beyond paycheck to paycheck, moving beyond paycheck to paycheck. So thank you all for joining us. Good evening. My name is Shelley Jones, and I'm the Assistant Director of Alumni Engagement here at Missouri State University. So the Alumni Association is the organization through which Missouri State University students continue their connection with MSU when they leave the university. The Alumni Association is a non-dues paying organization, and all alumni are viewed as members. And I know we have several students on this webinar as well, so we're excited to introduce you to. So what are the Bear Talks alumni webinars? We started these a few months ago. Alumni-driven professional and personal development sessions previously were available to students through classrooms and organizational meetings. Of course, the COVID pandemic has changed things a little bit, and we were able to expand this programming to more of a virtual format. We have lots of wonderful alums that are out there that are here to share their wisdom, so we're excited to have you all. So how tonight's webinar feature will work, we cannot hear or see you. You will use the Q&A feature if you have questions throughout the session. And then we will share our panelists' contact information in follow-up communications. So if you do not feel that your question was answered, you can reach out to them directly after the webinar. Unfortunately, due to time limitations, we will not get to every question. Panelists are participating this evening as alums, and they are not here to promote or recruit for their organization. So let's topic tonight, making and sticking to a budget can be tough. Maybe you're in a challenging financial situation during these unprecedented times, or maybe you're part of the roughly 80% of Americans who live paycheck to paycheck. So tonight we'll be joining our panel of alumni, and they'll be discussing the importance of a budget, how to make one that works for you, how to manage your student loans, reduce debt and repay loans, credit scores and the differences between credit and debit cards, and basic personal finance principles to help you win with money. So we have a poll. Okay, there we go. And we wanted to know, students, young alumni or alum, which best describes you? And then what do you need the most help with? Budgeting, student loans, general finance, and banking questions. So take just maybe about 30 seconds and see what we come up with. Okay.
You're good. It looks like we have about 7 people who haven't responded yet, so I'll give it just a little bit longer, another 10 seconds, and then I'll show the results.
Okay. So it looks like we have a good mix, 41% recent graduates, other alums, 32% current students. So a little bit of everything. And wow, look at that. I'm looking for help with it's very evenly divided with those first 3, making a budget, sticking to a budget, and student loans, and general finance and banking. So that's good. Well, you all are in the right place. So there we go. We'll close that out here. All right, so first let me go ahead and introduce our panelists. First we have Taylor Brashears. Taylor, and of course all 3 of our panelists this evening are all Missouri State alums. Taylor has a passion for making budgeting an accessible habit and making your budget work for you. She has led budgeting workshops for college and high school students and led a financial peace university course. So Taylor joins us this evening from Baton Rouge, Louisiana. So Perry Key. Perry Key has 37 years of banking and mortgage experience, with the last 19 years spent with First National Bankers Bank as a senior loan review and credit analyst, and the last 5 years as a Louisiana department head. And Perry also joins us from Louisiana this evening. Hello, you two.
Oh,
Rob. Some of you may know that he's pretty familiar. He's there on the Missouri State campus. He is the director of financial aid. And Rob got his start in the Office of Financial Aid in 2008 as a graduate assistant. So worked his way up through a variety of positions, and now he is the director, which is a position he's been in 2019. So Rob joins us tonight right here from Springfield, Missouri. So thank you, all three of you, for joining us this evening. And with that, I'm going to turn things over to our moderator, Candace Wolf, the Assistant Director of Alumni Activities for the Alumni Association.
Thank you so much, Shelley, and thank you to our panelists too. Appreciate you being here tonight and offering your expertise. So one thing that I'm really excited about with our panelists tonight is I think everybody's kind of coming with a different background and some different experience. So I think versus maybe some of the other webinars we have, there's an opportunity for some discourse or some disagreements with things, but I think that that will hopefully add to the conversation. Finances aren't something straightforward. It's not easy, or everybody would be good at it. So I think it's going to be great that we've all got a little bit different perspective. I know a lot of the questions that we had submitted in advance had to do with making a budget and what are some budgeting tools. And so I wanted to let our participants know tonight that we're going to be sharing a lot of information after the webinar on how to kind of set up a budget, some different articles on repaying loans. So in addition to the resources you'll get tonight from our panelists, hopefully we'll be able to answer some questions through that. A little bit about me, I guess, that I'm really passionate. I'm excited about tonight's webinar. I've done some of the personal finance courses like Taylor has done. I'm certainly not an expert, and so there are going to be some questions that come in that I might not completely understand. But again, we're all coming from different perspectives, and the goal for tonight is for us all to just learn a little bit and hopefully move down that continuum of being more prepared with our personal finances. So in my challenges in teaching personal finance classes, I know that really the biggest challenge of all is making and sticking to a budget. And so that's where we will start tonight. So I want to start with what's the best way to find a budget that works for you and your family? And Taylor, do you want to take a stab at that?
Yeah. So my philosophy on budgeting is a zero-based budget. That basically means that every dollar has a job. So whether it's an actual expense or maybe it's saving, like everything has a job. I do believe that I'm so strict with my budget. Like even if I go to the vending machine and spend like 85 cents, like I also put 85 cents in my budget. So a budget is something that you have to track. It's not just something that you just, hey, here's a goal that I have, and then you don't actually follow up on it. Like every week we check in and we, modify our budget a little bit. So essentially whenever you're creating a budget, you start with the income that you have. So there are different types of budgets. I know that we have some like questions maybe later on about irregular spending, but I'm just going to go for like a normal budget. Like if you have a predictable income, let's say it's every 2 weeks, or you get paid once a month or twice a month, whatever it is. I've been paid multiple different ways. You just start with your income and then you start tracking your expenses. And then with the zero-based budget, it's subtracting every time, like let's say, rent or a mortgage, and then you got your utilities, your car gas, your groceries, maybe you've got a restaurant fund. For those of you that are married, I always recommend doing it together. Just like anything else in life, marriages are partnerships, and even if your finances are slightly separate, I do recommend at least having a together budget so you all can do that. A couple other recommendations that I have for a budget is creating a miscellaneous fund. Nobody generally thinks to do the miscellaneous fund. I put like about $50 in there just in case, like those unexpected expenses that can really throw off your budget. You can also put funds in a budget where it's like gradually saving up for like maybe a vacation or a car maintenance, or maybe you like to spend $300 in getting your hair done at the hair salon, and like, so it's not like $300 coming out of your budget, or like, $1,000 for a vacation or whatever it is, gradually saving up those funds. There's multiple ways that you can save or use a budget. Like you can do apps, you can do an Excel spreadsheet. I am not an Excel spreadsheet sort of gal. I like my Every Dollar app, which is pretty and colorful, and it does all the math for me because I'm a liberal arts major. So I really like that. And overall, whenever I'm thinking about, or I'm talking to somebody new who's never budgeted before, it takes time to like actually establish this habit. Just like exercising, just like brushing your teeth in the morning, like you had to learn to do that habit. So budgeting's the exact same thing. I have been budgeting since, I had to look back before this webinar. It's literally November 2015. So since November 2015, almost 5 years now, I have been budgeting literally every dollar that I have. And my very first one was absolutely terrible. And I was really like kind of scrolling through and I was like, oh, wow, I really wasn't good at this. But now it's a refined thing. And it's something that I literally think about secondhand. You know, it's just like anything else, like you establish a schedule. I recommend with budgeting, like pairing it with something fun that you like. Maybe it's like going and getting a coffee and I'll work on my budget. And or like maybe you do it while you're watching your favorite movie every month or something like that. A budget's not meant to restrict you either. So make sure to give yourself some fun things to do in there. Married couples, I definitely recommend doing some personal funds for yourself, like no questions asked funds. So you don't have too many disputes, but I don't think that budgets are meant to restrict everything. You know, it's there to give yourself permission for your goals, for the actual expenses that you need to take care of, you know, your Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and also your fun things too. So just be patient with yourself whenever you're creating a budget.
Good advice. I know a question came in asking what that budgeting app was. It's Every Dollar. Is that what you use?
That's what I use. I have tried Mint before, but here's the thing that I think about those apps that, you know, automatically adjust it for you. One, I like the power to adjust my own budget. Two, it also makes me accountable. So like every time that I put in like, oh, I went and got a coffee for $3, like I'm putting in $3 and I see how much is left in my budget. So some of you all might like Mint. That's okay. Budgets and finances, like Candace said, are just, everybody kind of figures out what they can do for themselves and what works best for them. For me personally, I need to be held accountable. So I generally give myself a little bit more permission to like do some things. So looking at the budget helps me stay very accountable.
Perfect. Perry, I know something that we got a couple of questions about was saving money back for bigger purchases. Any advice for doing that without dipping into other areas of your budget?
Well, what I would say about that is really just establish an automatic deduction from your paycheck, or if you don't get paid, if you do something once a month, once a week, once every other month, whatever it is, but just set up something where it comes out automatically and you really don't miss it. And you can have those funds sent to a separate account like Taylor was talking about, some miscellaneous or another savings account or whatever, where you can have that money just put away. And in that way, you don't really miss it and you live on what you have. And it can be as small as $20 each time. It doesn't have to be anything big, but as long as you establish that habit of taking those funds out automatically to a different account, and then you really don't miss it, and you learn to live on what you do have left over, and sooner or later you'll realize that you've accumulated, you know, several, a lot of money where you can have a goal in mind where you need it for something big, because most of us are going to want to purchase a car or a home at some point. And, you know, that's a good way. And you have a goal set in mind. And one thing I would recommend too is actually putting that goal on paper, where you see whatever that dollar amount is you want to see, and then kind of figure out, what do I need to take out each pay period, or, you know, or each month, or whatever it may be, that's going to help me achieve that goal. And also look at what you can do and live without that amount of money each time. And that's the way to get started.
That's really good advice. I know I've heard about opportunity cost with things, and, you know, it's really easy to spend the money that you have. It's, you know, sometimes the easiest way to save back money is to just put it somewhere else where you don't even have to know that you're missing out on that other opportunity.
Exactly.
Yeah. Rob, I know we got some questions about student loans, and especially a lot of people who maybe are recent graduates still looking for jobs, or, you know, are having trouble in the time of coronavirus. What if your income cannot sustain loan repayment, the monthly amount on top of your everyday expenses? Any advice for people in that situation?
Yeah, sure. So there could be a couple of different situations loaded in that question. So new graduates, maybe who are looking for a job and haven't quite landed one yet, that might be a prime opportunity for a student to look at continued forbearance, where they enter a period of non-payment with the lender. And that just gives them a little additional breathing room before making those regularly scheduled payments to either the Department of Education or their private lender, whoever they borrowed the funds from. So that could be an option for some people. But if it's just an ongoing income is just not sufficient to cover all of those living expenses and what's been calculated as your monthly repayment for your loans, if you have a loan with the Department of Education, which many students do, I would recommend going to their website on studentaid.gov and using the loan repayment calculator that they actually have available. It's a calculator where you'll enter all your information about your income, the loan debt that you have, and it offers suggestions of what loan repayment options might fit your needs best. There are about 7 different repayment plans that students can actually have when repaying federal student loans. So everyone's set up on that standard repayment plan, which is just a calculation of how much you owe to how much you need to pay to get it paid off in 10 years, and it is not sensitive to income at all. However, the other income-based plans, repay, income-based repayment, graduated repayment, they can fluctuate how much you pay on a monthly basis, and they're much more sensitive to your income level so that you're not cutting a check every month that eats into other essential living expenses. So that's what I would encourage on studentaid.gov. Going to the loan repayment calculator and simulator, and it'll actually give you the list of options that are best for you, as well as whether or not a certain repayment plan qualifies for, say, public service loan forgiveness. If you're in an occupation where you plan on participating in that program, you don't want to erroneously go into a repayment plan that's not eligible, and then your monthly payments aren't counting towards that loan forgiveness. Now, on the flip side, if you've borrowed from a private lender, you need to contact that lender to see if they have any sort of repayment plan options that are deviate from the standard plan. Many do not, some may, but private lenders do oftentimes offer forbearance for recent grads who are struggling with payments. So the first thing to do is always to contact your lender or servicer to make sure that there aren't other options you haven't explored yet.
Harry, I know we were maybe going to talk about this a little bit later, but talk a little bit about the loan repayment thing and what Rob was talking about as far as talking to a lender and what that might do for people who, whether it's student loans or other types of loans.
Right. I guess I can focus more on other things other than student loans. If you just have a loan or a credit card, anything with a bank or other financial institution, the key element here is to contact them first. If you know you're feeling stressed and you can't fulfill your obligation in making those payments, I would certainly contact your lender and see what can we do to refinance this debt somehow, make the payment lower. A lot of times they're going to be willing to do that because they want to maintain a lending relationship with you. And the key element here is not having them try to chase you down. You know, if you get too delinquent, you're going to start hearing calls from collectors and that sort of thing. So it's really important to contact the lender first when you feel like you're not going to be able to fulfill that obligation of making that monthly payment. And a lot of times they can refinance things where it can be affordable to you as long as it fits within the bank policy. But again, I can't overemphasize enough of contacting the lender first. Whoever your loan officer is or wherever that institution may be, contact them first to see what other options you may be able to have.
Yeah, just to jump in after Perry on that, for direct loans, so through the Department of Education, similarly, for a student who fails to make a payment after 90 days, they get reported to the 3 major credit bureaus, and then things just kind of get more dramatic from there with pretty severe consequences. So just to underscore, whether it's private debt or debt with the Department of Education for student loans, being proactive and communicating, any issues that you may be having with those repayments can often go a long way in finding a more amenable solution than just ignoring the letters, not answering the phone. That's where students start to go into default, and then it's much more difficult to rehabilitate a loan than if the student just brings it back out of delinquency. Default is far worse than going into delinquency when it comes to student loans.
let's talk a little bit about the credit score issue and how both repayment can help or hurt a credit score. Perry, maybe start with you. Talk a little bit about the importance of a credit score and how to raise it and why that's important.
Absolutely. One thing I'll say, just to give a little background information, there's typically 3 different credit sources that produce a credit score. And the credit score generally ranges from like 300 to 850, somewhere in those numbers. Of course, the higher the number is, the better your credit score is, and you're perceived to be a better risk to a bank or financial institution the higher your score is. Now, the main components in actually calculating that score are a couple of things. First and foremost is how you have paid your monthly obligations. Whether it be a credit card or if it's a monthly loan that you have, your mortgage, your rent, anything along those lines that you pay something monthly, how have you paid that? And the key is that you've never been 30 days late. Once you become 30 days or more late on a payment, that tends to bring your score down. The other thing is something called revolving credit, which is basically a credit card. And we'll talk more about that later today, I think, too. But one of those things, if you have a credit card and you have a limit, let's say of $1,000, and currently your balance is $990, that means you're pretty close to the maximum on that credit card on your revolving credit, and that will also bring your score down too. And also, one of the other things that kind of brings it down somewhat is having inquiries. A lot of people don't think about that. If you go to buy a car, for instance, at a car dealership, they're probably going to send your application to 10 different lenders. And, they'll all look at it, and that counts as an inquiry. And that tends to bring your score down too. But really the 2 things that really will hurt you is not paying where you become 30 days or more late on monthly payments, and also where your revolving credit is at its limit. When it's real close to it, both of those things are 2 things that really will bring your score down tremendously. And one thing that you do have with a credit score, you have the power to do whatever you want to do in terms of getting a loan with the bank, because a lot of banks have a minimum credit score that they require for anybody to even qualify for a loan. So as long as you meet that and have maintained your obligations with other creditors, then I'll give you the power to be able to buy something. If you don't have a good credit score, it's going to hurt you because it's going to bump your interest rate up, therefore making your payment higher. So, it's always a good habit to maintain those things early. And as you build your credit, continue to do that and make sure that you're never 30 days late. And again, contact the lender if you're having an issue, because all those things can either hurt or help your credit score.
Perfect. Any other thoughts on the credit score question?
I'll share my thoughts if you'd like. I am not like anti-credit cards. I'm not anti-credit score. I want to share this. I do have some like hesitancy whenever I share this because of depending on how you grew up around credit cards or the credit score or finances in general, like that can really kind of dictate like how you feel about what I'm about to say. But I am in my late 20s and I've never had a credit card, and I don't have a credit score that I know of. Every time I've like checked it once a year, like I don't have one. I've never had any debt. I've never I just have never had a credit card, and I know that there are ways around that. It's just more difficult. So my parents got really into Dave Ramsey, and I don't want you all to dictate like how you feel about Dave Ramsey about what I'm about to say, but that is just like it was my journey into finances. I literally could not stand the man because I would hear his voice on the radio. I was like 15 years old, and my mom's like torturing me by listening to Dave Ramsey while we're in the car going to school or whatever. So my parents like cut up all their credit cards. They don't have any debt. They haven't had any debt for like 7 years. They've paid it all off. I think that there should be like a healthy fear of a credit card. And I have a fear of a credit card mainly because of my own spending habits, because I know that I will give myself permission to like swipe that card for reasons that are not in my budget. And I think that like whenever I go to buy a house, I know that there's some banks that will do what's called like I think it's manual like overriding or something like that,
Yeah.
where they look at your history. of how you paid your bills, your income, and then like whatever level of like down payment you can have. Not all banks do that. The worst thing that's happened to me so far with like not having a credit score is that I've just had to have like a larger deposit, like for my apartment, and then also for like I've switched phone bills a couple of times and I've needed to have a deposit. So I am not giving you any sort of advice because I don't want to like, I don't want anybody to come for me in the DMs or anything like that is saying like I'm super like anti-credit card, because I'm not. I really am not. I'm just merely like kind of presenting the idea that like I've been able to function and be fairly successful as like a young adult or a young alum and without a credit card. Yes, I have not had to try and venture with buying a house yet, but that is something that I'm looking forward to in the future. And I know that I will be able to say like, here's my down payment and here's also my like impeccable history with paying my bills and my consistent income. Anything that's like a car, I've always vowed for just going the used route, like not the beaters, although I drove a beater for 10 years. I drove a 98 Dodge Dakota for 10 years and I loved it. Sold it for $1,000 because it just ran. But, like I saved up cash for my car that I bought that was new to me. Still used, but new to me. And I do believe in like saving as much as you can and not going into debt unless you like, it is like an emergency, like I know that things happen. So I don't want to come off as like too judgy of like, oh, you shouldn't do credit cards, or you shouldn't do any debt. It's really like, I understand a lot of circumstances are very different and everybody's family is different. I'm just merely presenting that I've done it. So
again, I think it's good to have a different perspective on it. And that I've lived that life too. And there are times where it gets in the way, but I don't think it's as necessary as sometimes people are make it out to be. But obviously having a bad credit score in any kind of situation is not a good thing. So
a low credit score is different than a no credit score, very much so. Like, because low credit, that means like you've had some history and lenders are really nervous about that. But I have like no credit score.
We had a question that came in the Q&A. I'm going to go ahead and work in. What's up with the apps that promise instant increase in your credit score? Perry, are you familiar with those or worked with any of those? Or Rob, you might know something too.
No, I'm not really familiar with any of that. So I'll have to defer that one maybe to Rob. I'm not familiar with any of those apps that can boost your score. I mean, I know what can boost it is paying everything on time and, and maintaining your payments as you should and not getting too much credit card debt, as Taylor just alluded to. So that's what I would say.
Yeah, I'm also unfamiliar with the mechanisms behind the claims. I would always be leery of quick fixes because they can oftentimes kind of cover over maybe systemic issues with budgeting. So I would address more of maybe the root causes that led to the lower credit score than trying to go with an app that might give us an instant boost.
It's probably too good to be true, what I would say to that.
And I believe all the credit bureaus will offer a free credit score for you. You don't have to pay anything
Yes.
to find out your credit score. So yeah, I know some of those apps can be misleading in that way. Let's talk about for our college students among us or those looking to establish credit, how can they use a credit card responsibly? What are some ways to be able to build your credit with using a credit card responsibly while you're in college?
I guess I'll try that one first. I would say just if you have one, you only need one. You don't need multiple ones, as Taylor alluded to. You just need one. And I would say just pay it regularly, and you're going to get a minimum payment for the bill, which is mostly interest. It's not going to do too much to the principal side of it, but if you can pay a little more than what the minimum payment requires, that's a good thing to start with and kind of figure out what it may take to, make that payment go away quicker. Because one of the things about credit cards, type of credit it's called is revolving, which means it's kind of a circle and it never ends in a lot of cases. If you just pay the minimum every time, you'll never get rid of it. But at least if you can maintain that payment and also to pay a little more than what's required, that is a good way to get started and establish yourself in some credit. And then it'll help boost your score a little bit too, because you won't be up at the maximum, but you'll also be paying it on time as well.
Yeah, I think along with that, we had a couple of questions. One, talking about how to pay off a credit card that has a $2,000 balance in less than a year when you're paying just minimum payments or a little bit over. And same thing with the mortgage, applying maybe $50, each additional month. How does that affect your mortgage payment or your mortgage payoff?
If you pay a little more every month, it will, especially on the mortgage, it will reduce the time it takes to pay it off. So in other words, if you have a 15, 20, or 30-year mortgage and you pay an extra $50 every month, it's going to reduce the time that you pay that loan off, because that $50 goes to principal, really, because you make the payment for interest and principal that's required, but then the rest of it will go right to that, to the principal side. And that'll help reduce it, and you'll pay it off sooner that way. And that's an excellent thing to do if you're able to do so.
Yeah, anybody else want to chime in on just kind of paying off debts quicker or debt repayment methods?
I mean, I always say that a little extra income and working a little harder, can help. I was a server throughout my time. And earlier I said I've never had debt. We paid off debt, but it was my partner's debt. So it was never in my name. So I guess me personally, I've never had any debt, but we paid off 15 grand in 4 months. We were rolling through it, but we were also working our tails off. I don't know if I would really recommend as fast or as hard as we were working, because I feel we sacrificed a lot of sleep, mental health, and social skills. So we weren't living a very balanced life, but we were very intense about it. And we were really passionate about getting it off as fast as possible, because we knew the power of compound interest and how much you can end up paying for something if you don't pay it off. Your $100 purchase can turn into a $125 purchase really easily if you don't actually pay it off. And so we worked extra jobs. I know that Uber is also a great way, or delivering pizzas right now. COVID makes things really weird. We just worked outside hours. Maybe you've got a side hustle that you can kind of figure out that'll make money if you're creative. I'm not Miss Crafts. I never shop at Joann's. Maybe that's something that you do, and you could try and find some innovative ways to make money. I'm also very much pro marketplace. Look in your closets or the things that you have around you, and see if you can start selling some stuff. There's a lot of ways that you can make some income and really amp up paying off debt.
Rob, I know one thing that I hear quite a bit is that, student loans typically have a lower interest rate. And so, really just paying the minimum on that is really all you need to do. Any advice on that? I know that's not the question we got, just something I thought was relatable to the topic.
Yeah. I mean, you'll be structured on a repayment plan that, will have a minimum payment that you can make monthly. Kind of similar to Taylor, I was very interested in getting my student loans paid off as quickly as possible. So, working a couple extra side jobs, parking cars at the Empire State Fair one summer, things like that, just to get a little bit extra money that I could apply towards those student loans. Because once you get that interest paid down, then you're working on that principal, and the interest that accrues gets smaller and smaller. So then, you really start to feel that momentum pick up, and then it just gets even more exciting because you get closer to that zero mark. So, if you have the ability, maybe paying a little bit extra here and there, if you pay more than the minimum once, you're not obligated to continue doing so. So it doesn't put you on the hook for a higher minimum monthly repayment. So you might, use a little bit extra. If you have fluctuating income, which I think we're going to talk about later, you might use a little bit of that to pay down a little bit more too. But just being smart with how you're repaying those loans. We're going to get into this a little bit later, I think, with how COVID is impacting student loan repayments. But right now, there's a moratorium on student loan repayments until December 31st for federal student loans. So no payment is required. Interest is at 0% for this period of time. So rather, if you have the ability, again, if you have the ability to do it, keep making those payments, because if you can get that interest that had accrued prior to March 13th paid off, every dollar you're paying between now and December 31st is going towards that principal. So, if you have the income that you can apply towards those student loans, continuing to make those payments would benefit you as well. So, just kind of being aware of what is impacting your student loans, so that you have you can make the most informed and financially prudent decisions based on the circumstances you find yourself.
Perfect. Yeah, I know you alluded to multiple income sources, or like we had one person who said their, annual income might fluctuate by $10,000 depending on, how those side hustles or different jobs are going. How do you make a budget in those kind of situations? Any advice from you guys on that?
Sure, I'll go first. This was my, the past 2 years has been my first time that I've only had one W-2 to actually worry about whenever it came to taxes. Other times I've had so many jobs that I'm having to go down a checklist. Whenever you have multiple incomes, every income needs to be listed on your budget. If you sell something on Marketplace for $50, put it on the top of your income and budget for it and your expenses. Whenever it comes to unpredictable income, say if you're in sales, or me, you were a server or bartender, or maybe you're an Uber driver or pizza deliverer, you can't always expect how much you're going to be tipped, because it's dependent on that night. Or how much commission you're going to make if you're going to work in sales. But you can generally predict the absolute minimum that you're going to have. So, right, the absolute minimum that you will make. I can count on $1,500 this month. Make sure your bases are covered. You've got your shelter, your food, utilities, all that taken care of. And then from there, any additional income, you'll just budget for it. And say, a budget is essentially a list of your priorities. It is important that you feed yourself and you have a house over your head. And then from there, all the gravy that's on top of that, it's maybe I need to buy myself an interview outfit. So I'm going to budget $100 for clothing or whatever. You know what? I actually I want to pay an additional $200 on my student loans. So I'm going to write $200 on my student loans. And then as you make more income, as you're going down this list, you can start crossing it off of okay, I've taken care of all this. And, I think that's maybe the simplest way I can explain whenever you have an unpredictable income. For anybody who's really in that situation and wants help with their budget, or honestly in any situation, like they said earlier, they're going to share my contact information, and I'm happy to help people with their budgets for sure.
Yeah, and I would just underscore when making that budget, just what Taylor mentioned, having that bare bones baseline of those essentials in the most Spartan lifestyle, your rent, your food, your utilities, the things you have to pay each month. And then you'll know that, and then you just build it up from there for your expenses, kind of triaging what your expenses are. So unfortunately, some of those last things on the pile might be some luxury items, but you still want to include those in your budget. And then, if you look at several months of income, you should be able to find an average of what that bare minimum income stream is, even with fluctuations. So then you have at least a starting point, rather than just throwing up your hands and feeling overwhelmed because of such massive fluctuations. And then if you can live off that, great. And then anything that's extra you can kind of set aside for maybe leaner months, put them into the emergency fund for when life happens. But just knowing those kernels of what needs to be in your budget are the best starting point that you could begin from.
Perfect. I thought this was an interesting question, kind of going along with what you guys have been talking about. How do you stick to a realistic, healthy grocery budget when you're a college student? I thought this was fun. How do you trim the fat, so to speak, on your budget so you can eat healthy? Or have other luxuries too. Maybe it's good food for you. You like nicer food, or maybe it's something else.
So go ahead.
One thought is just, you don't have to be in the grocery game alone. So if you can buy in bulk, oftentimes you'll get a better return on your money if you can buy in larger quantities and divvy it up between you and roommates or friends or whomever. So usually bulk purchases can see some financial savings there as well. Shopping sales, my mom would go through the grocery store with a calculator and a coupon book. So using coupons, just putting a little bit of time can really make a difference on the groceries, because the fast, easy stuff is just that, but you can still buy good, wholesome food if you're willing to put in a little bit of that time and energy to making sure that you're spending your hard-earned dollars as effectively as possible.
Yeah, I would agree with you too, Rob. I know when I was in college many years ago, there was 3 or 4 of us that lived together, and we would go shopping together and buy in bulk, just like you said. And we were able to plan meals that we would cook for that week. And it seemed to work. I mean, we all split the bill, and we all, I was the cook from Louisiana, so I did all the cooking for my roommates. And just that we were able to figure out what we needed to buy. And we didn't overspend too much because, like you said, buying in bulk and deciding what you were going to cook each week was really beneficial to all of us. And we were able to stick to our budget, and it worked. If you're alone, maybe it's be a little different, but I'm just saying if you have roommates, it seemed to work for us pretty well.
Yeah. I think like the habit of cooking and meal prepping, like for me, like my habit is always on Sundays. Like I go grocery shopping maybe on Saturdays, and then I'll cook all day on Sunday. Not all day, but like at least for the afternoon or for the morning. And it's really interesting how that habit also coincided with my budgeting habit, because it was so important to like not ruin my budget from like grocery shopping. And so I had to be very intentional about with my recipes, making sure that I had somewhat similar ingredients. I also think that like vegetables, for example, like I don't know what your opinion is on organic versus not organic, but like there's a lot of stores that have organic vegetables and not organic vegetables. And like you don't have to shop at like Whole Foods type stores to like eat healthy. Not to get too political or opinionated, but honestly, I think that if you shop at Whole Foods, you're just wasting your money, honestly, because it's just so overpriced. And maybe it's great for those specialty items. Like if you have a special diet, let's say you're like vegan or keto, or maybe you just like a lot of protein or something like that, and you're supplementing with like protein powder or protein bars or something like that, those specialty items, like those can add up. But it's really, again, like what your priorities are. If you're trying to prioritize like more vegetables and like whole type foods, or if you're really trying to, specify your diet and that specific way. I think everybody's definition of healthy can be kind of different, so it's hard to really answer that question. But the best recommendation I can say is make cooking fun. Because that's what will save your money. Because whenever you're like stuck on campus and you're like, well, I'm out of like my points and for my card, and I can't even remember what it's called anymore, but I'm just gonna like get Chick-fil-A real quick and like swipe my card, and now you've paid like $7 to $9 for something that honestly you could have gotten like a lot of chicken for $10 at Walmart. Like you can get like 4 or 5 pounds of chicken if that's what you eat. So also I would recommend like those pickup apps. Like if you shop at Walmart, like Walmart pickup apps are really great, because then you can like see the total as you're going, and then you might be like, oh, like actually maybe I don't need that bag of chips, or I don't need all those like drinks or whatever it is. It's nice to see that total. I also my partner, his dad used to make a game out of like the calculator and being able to like actually guess the total at the very end after the whole grocery trip. So like he became a human calculator essentially, and was starting to like just keep track of it. You could also just use your phone if you're not a human calculator. Like myself, like I don't like doing math, so I like to use tools that work smart and not hard. So I would recommend giving yourself like some sort of like tool to where you can actually predict how much your grocery trip's going to be every time.
And I'll just, one parting thought for any of our current students who are listening in, if food insecurity is something that you're actually concerned about, we do have the Bear Pantry on campus, which provides nutritious, wholesome food to students, and also some fun foods as well. But please, if that is something that you're considering or struggling with, know that resource is available to you. And there's information all over the website about it, but just thought I'd give them a shout out because that's an important resource that students need to know about.
Absolutely. Thanks for sharing that, Rob. I know we're not going to make it to all the questions today, but I did want to remind our participants you can use the Q&A feature to submit questions, and anything we don't get to today, we'll share with our panelists if it's anonymous. be sure to put that in your follow-up survey so that we can refer you to the right person. But Rob, I just wanted to give you a chance to talk about other options for students, trying to repay loans or to get loans to kind of make it through college. Any advice or resources you want to share with them?
Yeah, absolutely. So no matter where a student's attending, but talking about Missouri State, if a student fills out the FAFSA, that's fantastic. We encourage every student, no matter what their family financial situation may be, to submit a FAFSA. It's free, it's relatively quick, and it opens the door to a lot of potential. So I would encourage everyone, even if you don't think you'll qualify for anything or only qualify for loans, go ahead and fill out the form just so we have it on file. And one really good reason why is this past spring semester with all the shutdowns, only students who had submitted a FAFSA or were able to submit a FAFSA were eligible to receive the Federal CARES Act funding. So, I mean, we never could have projected that, but just one more feather in the cap of make sure you submit the FAFSA every year. But if you submit the FAFSA and the information that you're reporting for your family finances is just off from what your current finances are, because keep in mind on the FAFSA, we're going off of information that's 2 years old at this point. We have something called professional judgment that we can use. So a student can request a special circumstance review, whether it's loss of income or loss of a job, or maybe the parents have gone back to school and they're paying tuition. We can take a number of events into consideration and impact change on the FAFSA that might help the student become eligible for additional need-based financial aid. So whether that's getting students eligible for the subsidized loan where interest is not accruing while they're in school, or even all the way down to the Pell Grant eligibility range, we've seen it all. So if that's something that a student thinks that they might need, we do special circumstances all day, every day. And the next is we do have some emergency funds in place. Now, again, after the spring semester, those took a pretty heavy body shot just because we were doling out a lot of funding to students, which is great. That's why it's there. But for students who maybe have experienced, the loss of a parent or a guardian or a natural disaster, aside from COVID. I mean, we've had students apply for, hurricanes, tornadoes, wildfires, those types of life-altering events. We can assist with those as well. And then we also have degree completion grants. So students who are right at the cusp of finishing their academic program, but they're just running out of funding for whatever reason. We do have some grants available to help students cross that finish line, get that account balance paid off so that they can walk across the stage, get their transcripts, and then get gainfully employed. And then start donating back so that they can pay it forward to future Missouri State Bears, right? So we do have a number of options available. On our website at the missouristate.edu/financial aid, we have a schedule an appointment link where a student can actually schedule a virtual appointment with any one of our counselors and have a one-on-one conversation to discuss whatever they might need to help them pay for school or those living expenses that maybe aren't covered right now because of the current crisis we're in or other situations that the students finding themselves.
That's great, Rob. I know a lot of students are kind of wondering what other resources are available, so that's great help. We've got a couple of questions about an emergency fund. So for those who are trying to pay off student loans, what kind of emergency fund would you recommend, Rob? And then in general, what do you think is an appropriate amount for an emergency fund for anybody, depending on income levels, or what do you base that decision on?
Yeah. So, the most general answer is anything. If you could put anything away into emergency fund, that's better than zero. So, if you can't do thousands and thousands of dollars, but only can do a couple hundred, fantastic. Put it away, have that to help offset whatever costs might come up. Generally, experts smarter than me will say anywhere from 3 to 6 months of your regular living expenses is what you would want to put into an emergency fund. So that can vary from person to person based on their lifestyle, based on if you're renting versus mortgage versus living with parents, whatever the case may be. But 3 to 6 months is what most people say. When you're budgeting, an emergency fund should be included in that budget until you at least hit that whatever threshold you've decided is right for you, and you have that money squirreled away for a rainy day. So you should build that into your budget. And then once you hit that mark, you can just redivert that to regular savings or retirement or whatever other avenue you want to invest that money into. But I strongly encourage every student, every recent graduate, and everyone else attending to, if you haven't already, start putting some money away. It can be a slow process, but anything is better than nothing. For some college students, 3 to 6 months of living expenses can be hard because, well, I live in the residence hall and then I, do whatever. So, maybe meet with, someone like Taylor at your institution who can help you calculate what 3 to 6 months might look like for you. And for some students, it makes sense, whatever the cost of a new set of tires or a plane ticket home if you're an out-of-state student. So those types of emergencies are things that you can consider as well.
Any other advice to that end?
No, I just would echo what Rob said. I mean, 3 to 6 months is generally kind of the norm that you would want to have because, you could have a loss of job, have a natural disaster. Like we just had a hurricane here in Louisiana not too long ago. So you never know, things can happen. But I would just echo what he said that, just want to have at least 3 to 6 months if you're able to do that. And just start again, like I mentioned earlier tonight, having an automatic deduction come out of your checking account or your paycheck or whatever and go to your savings and set up that emergency fund because it can come in handy at some point. You just never know when you might need it.
It's definitely like saved me a couple of times. One time our engine like completely dropped out. So then it was like $2,000 just to replace an engine. I also want to verify, because Rob mentioned like tires. So there's 2 times that you could potentially have to buy tires. One is whenever your tire blows out and you weren't expecting it. Another time is whenever you have to actually replace your tires. So just definitely remembering what the difference between a savings account is and an emergency is. There's, if you actually make a savings for car maintenance, it's not an emergency anymore. And also, an emergency fund is there to help you to make emergencies not be emergencies. So whenever your tire does blow out and you're like, well, crap, now I have to buy a new tire, and I wasn't expecting this, you have the money for it. Yes, it sucks that you had to do that, but you have the money. And it's meant to also avoid having to swipe a credit card and go into debt for whenever there is an emergency. So it's really just a safety net there for you.
Carrie, this might be your last question, and I think it's telling with everything we've talked about tonight. Do you have any advice on financial security and preventing identity theft? Because I think that no matter where people are kind of on the spectrum, it's something people need to consider.
Yes, that is really on the rise, obviously, more so than it ever has been. And just a couple of things I jotted down. Maybe one obvious thing is don't leave things visible, like leave stuff in your car. On your dashboard, your checkbook, your wallet, your purse, anything like that. It's just asking for trouble. My wife and I live here in this neighborhood in Baton Rouge, and we get a report every month about theft. And it's really just people leave their car unlocked, and it ends up being stolen, and then you have all your information there available. That's the first thing, is just to keep things out of sight and keep them close to you and secure. One other thing that I've done, and my wife and I have done, there's a little sleeve you can put on your credit card, because I've heard people that will walk by you and be able to swipe the information off your credit card just by walking by you. It's a new thing for theft, and it really is helpful, and it protects, and it's really not expensive at all. It's a little sleeve you can put your card in. It's the size of a credit card, and you just put it in there and keep it in your purse or your wallet, and it prevents that from happening. It's called
RFID.
RFID is what it's called, and it'll protect your card. The other thing too is don't give information over the phone. You get all these weird calls sometimes, and they'll say, look, this is the IRS and you owe us this, this, and this, and I need to get some information, or you're going to be going to jail, that kind of thing. And it kind of scares people, but you never want to give personal information over the phone either, whether it be your credit card number, your social security number, anything like that, your bank account, certainly. You don't want to give anything like that over the phone. And just be very protective, and don't leave things out in the open where they can be seen. It's too easy. And certainly when you order stuff online, make sure it's at a secure site. That's going to protect your credit card information and your information too about yourself personally. So those are things I would say just to make sure that you take care of and keep your things protected. And also when you get things that you don't need anymore, like old bank statements or things like that, put them in a shredder and just shred them into little pieces, and they'll never be able to be seen. Or if you get a new credit card that you're replacing the old one with, cut it up into little pieces and get rid of it. You know, just don't leave anything available where anybody can get their hands on it and find out any information about you, because it's too easy to do. It's just, in today's day and age, with the technology we have, it's very easy to lose your identity and have somebody else pretend to be you.
Thank you for that. I know we are just about out of time, and I want to let Shelley have some time to talk about things with the Alumni Association. I know we didn't make it to every question. I think most of them I have names for, so we can refer those to the correct panelist. But again, you'll receive a survey by this time tomorrow, and feel free to add any additional questions you have for our panelists on there, and we'll be sure to get those to them, as well as their contact information so you can contact them directly. But thank you again to our panelists. Really appreciate your time tonight and the expertise you provided, and I'll turn it back over to Shelley.
Great. Thank you, Candace. So thank you all for joining us this evening. Following the webinar, we will be sending a survey out to everyone who's registered. So we're looking for suggestions for improvement, as well as any ideas that you might have for future topics and panelists. We will include the contact information for all of our panelists this evening. So if you did feel that your question was not answered, or you come up with some additional questions, they have graciously provided that contact information so you can follow up with them as well. This message that you'll also be receiving will include some additional resources that Candace is going to put together as well for you. Our next Bear Talks webinar is coming up on Thursday, October 1st, and this one will be from noon to 1 p.m. Central Standard Time. The title is called The Professor and the Street Artist. So October's Bear Talks webinar is going to be a little bit different. We're going to profile two amazing and inspiring artists: MSU Professor Emeritus Judith Fowler, a nationally registered art therapist, and Andrea Earhart Sanders, who is a street artist who is known locally and nationally for her commercial and residential murals. We'll include, like I said, some links to the follow-up email so you can register for this webinar, as well as some of our other wonderful programming that's coming up, including some of our homecoming activities next month. So thank you again, everyone, for being here, and we will see you next time.
Take care, everybody. Thank you. Thank you, panelists, for everything tonight, for being patient
Thank
with
you.
us.
We enjoyed it.
I'm going to go ahead and stop recording.